how can I serve you today? You must have heard that question at different times. To me, it all sounds very American. In fact, quite a few years ago, Heather and I went to a leadership conference in Vacaville in California. And we went just before the conference, and it was arranged that a pastor and his wife were going to take us out for the day and show us around San Francisco. And a lovely couple, Gary and Vicky, and they came and pick us up. And then he says, "How can we serve you today?" Quite beautiful. And they did serve us. We had a great day with them as they showed us all around San Francisco. But this is a very biblical concept, of course. Jesus said, Mark 10:45, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve." And recently there were some verses from Peter that impressed themselves upon me. In 1 Peter chapter 4 and verses 10 to 11, this is what it says. "Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with all the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ." During the pandemic, many things stopped. Now the world is different. In the world of bowls, things changed. There have actually been, in a lot of clubs, a lot of new members as people have gone out again and found that this is a great activity. You're outside, you get the fresh air, you get the exercise, you get the sociability. And so there have been many who started playing bowls. At the same time, there have been a good number who have stopped, because during the pandemic, they did other things. And they found they enjoyed doing those other things, and they never came back to bowls. Recently, I was having a conversation with the Surrey County Secretary, and he asked me when I was going to Africa again. The answer to him was the same as it's been for a long time. I said, well, I hope to go again sometime, but we have to see the COVID situation improve. When I got back, I thought, well, let's check again the situation in Uganda. And I found that just a few days before, actually, they had changed all the regulations. And currently, you no longer need to take a PCR test to go in or out of Uganda, which changes it dramatically. Because the whole thought of getting a negative test before you could get out of the country is like, not so good. But it's changed currently. So now I have to think again about whether I go out there again. I mean, it's actually been March 2019 was the last time that I went out to Africa. And of course, COVID is still an issue out there. They don't have all the vaccinations and so on that we have. Also, I had a pulmonary embolism in between, which stopped me from my last trip. But the Africans keep asking, when am I coming again? And then I think of these verses in Peter, who says we should use our gifts to serve others. So the situation may change again. We don't know what will happen, but I'm looking at the possibility of going out there in November. We'll see whether that happens or not. So what things have changed in our lives? Are there things that we used to do that we've stopped doing now? Or are there new things that we are now doing? You know, it is good from time to time just to stop and think about what we are doing. Is this what we should be doing now? You know, Again, Peter in verse 10 said, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. So the first point from this is that we should use our gifts. Miles Monroe wrote this. He said, the wealthiest places in the world are not gold mines, oil fields, diamond mines, or banks. The wealthiest place is a cemetery. There lies companies that were never started, masterpieces that were never painted. In the cemetery, there is buried the greatest treasure of untapped potential. There is a treasure within you that must come out. Don't go to the grave with your treasure still within you. There is a treasure within all of us. And he's saying, don't waste it. Don't waste those gifts that God has given you. Don't go through life not having done the things that you could have done. Now, all of us have gifts given by God. Peter said, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. You know, we all have those gifts to use, and we should be faithful in using them. Gifts in various forms. We're not the same. We're all different if we have different gifts. And Paul, as well as Peter, makes this very clear. Listen to what he says in Romans 12, verses 3 to 5. He says, for by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. For just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. He says here, do not think of yourself too highly. And whenever I read this, I think, well, that's not generally the problem. More often, we think too little of ourselves. I'm not good enough for that. Or, I cannot do that. There are others who are better at doing it than I can. And so we find these reasons not to do something, even not to use the gifts that God has given us. But Ephesians 2 verse 10 says, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Now, I think this is a brilliant verse because it tells us that we're God's handiwork. God made each one of us and he never makes mistakes. So he made you as you are and he made you well. And in that he's given you gifts because it says he's prepared good works for you to do. Now, he doesn't just set them up and then make you unable to do it. He's gifted you to do those things. There are things that he has for you to do, things that nobody else can do because they're for you to use your gifts to serve others in those ways. Dennis Waitley and Renee Witt said, on our track to success, we have to fight the tendency to look at others and see how far they have come. The only thing that counts is how we use the potential we possess and that we run our race to the best of our abilities. Again, he's saying the same thing. You have potential. You have gifts. Forget the others. What is important is that you use your potential and gifts and you use them to the best of your abilities. Run that race to the best of your abilities. And Paul said in those verses as well, he said there are many members for different functions. We have different gifts. In Christ, we are one body, which we see in the local church, just as here, Webburn Community Church. And he said each belongs to the others. So we have a responsibility to each other. And that involves using our gifts within the context of the church to help one another and build one another up. And it's important that we use those gifts that God has given us. And then Paul goes on, verses 6 to 8. He says, we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. So we have different gifts. He doesn't say some of you have gifts and some of you don't. He says we have different gifts. We all have gifts. In this particular passage, he's referring to 7 gifts, but they actually cover a very wide range. And it's not unreasonable to say that each of us has one or more of those gifts. They cover a very wide sphere. And of course, there are other gifts, but you almost certainly have one or more of those gifts. What did Peter say in verse 11? If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. If anyone speaks, if anyone serves. It was interesting seeing what John Stott said about this passage, because he said there are actually 2 categories of gifts among those 7. He said there are speaking gifts, prophecy, teaching, encouragement, and there are serving gifts, serving, giving, leading, and showing mercy. And so it fits very well with what Peter said about if anyone speaks, if anyone serves. But whatever our gifts, those gifts or other gifts that we have, the important thing is that we use them. That's what Paul wants to get across. Whatever gifts we have, we are to use them. So back to verse 10, he said, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. So the first point was that we should use our gifts, and the second point is we should use them to serve others. Danny Thomas said, success in life has nothing to do with what you gain in life or accomplish for yourself. It is what you do for others. So where should we use our gifts? Well, in that Romans 12 passage, Paul said that each belongs to the others. And here he was talking about the body, the church. And so we should use our gifts to help and to bless one another. And we should use our gifts for within the ministry of the church, whether that's internal or external in reaching out. It is important for us to use our gifts within that church or Christian community. But is that it? Does it end there? Is that it? We can say, oh yeah, I'm using them there, and that's fine. Or is there more to it? Matthew 5:13-16, Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So we are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. We are meant to be a positive influence in the world. So how do we do that? Well, first, of course, we have to be involved in the world. And it's very easy for us as Christians to just be involved within the Christian community, that everything we do is wrapped up within that community and meeting with Christians and so on. But we need to be involved in the world. Now, for those that have jobs in the world, well, that's part of what they're doing. You know? They are in that place where they can be salt and light. And that's good to be out there, but there's more than that. What about our other activities? Our interaction with neighbours, volunteering in different situations, being part of clubs or being involved in sports. Our neighbour opposite is not very good with computers. So if she needs help, she comes to me. When her and her husband needed to book their COVID vaccines, she came across because she couldn't manage to do this. We were able to sort them out. Now that her husband has died, Heather will check with her every so often to see how she is doing. And so we have our neighbours around us. Do we know our neighbours? You know, it's one of those strange things these days that in UK often people have no idea who their neighbours are. But for people just living close to them, do you know your neighbours? You know, what interaction do we have with any of them? You know, where we live, it works very well. We have the end of this little cul-de-sac, and it's like a little community that everybody there does actually know each other, and we see each other. Those 7 gifts that Paul was talking about included encouragement, and serving, and showing mercy. Now these are gifts we have and can use with those around us, with our neighbours. And then, of course, there are those who have practical gifts that can be used to help their neighbours. Not everyone has this. It wouldn't be any good if Margaret came over and asked me to put up a shelf for her, because it wouldn't work. Very bad idea. But there are others who have these gifts that they can use. You know, you see, carpentry or cooking or gardening or all sorts of different things. But we might not see it's gifts, maybe, but they are. We have these abilities, and they can be used to help others and help our neighbours around us. And then we go on to think of volunteering. You know, people can volunteer in local community centre or the Citizens Advice Bureau or the food bank or whatever. There are these different groups where we can volunteer and use our gifts. You know, in a lot of community centres, they like to teach computer skills, which various ones will have. CAB, if someone's got financial understandings, they can go and be there to help advise those who come in and just don't understand these things. Administrative skills to help organise things in these different places. You know, that's an area where we can be involved. Encouragement, serving, showing mercy, these gifts can be used in those volunteering situations and make a difference. And then if you think of clubs and sports, well, they always need help. The ability to chair a committee or to organise events or to manage an organisation or to run a website, you know, these are all valuable skills that can be used in this context. Albert Einstein said, "Strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value." And if we have these different gifts, we can be of value in these different situations. Heather and I have been involved in club bowls for this is the 21st year now, so it's a long time. And when we were at Oatlands Park Bowls Club, Heather had 2 stints on the committee and served as president for a period of time, which helped direct the club and use those gifts that she had. We organised the club competitions there for several years because it's something we enjoy doing and can do. Then 2015 was when I first entered a county competition. Now Surrey in bowls is divided into 4 areas. So 2016 was when I first played for area 2, which is our area. But you're in area 4, so you would it's not so good. But at the end of that first season there, I was asked to go on the area 2 committee, which I agreed to do that. The following year, the secretary, who'd done it for many years, decided he needed to stop for health reasons. So he asked me if I would be secretary of area 2. And I knew I could do it. We had to think about this. You know, this is going to take time, but I knew I could do that. So I did. I saw it as an opportunity to serve the bowls community. Now, most of you will probably know that last year our church closed, which was sad after 36 years, but it did. And for me, that actually released more time. And so around that time, I saw that the Surrey Bowls Council needed 3 more councillors. So I said, thought about it and thought, okay, I have some more time. And I offered to serve as a councillor. So I joined the Surrey Council, went to my first meeting where I didn't know, but they were going to elect people to the Finance and General Purposes Committee, which is the key decision making in Surrey Bowls. And I got elected onto the GP. I wasn't expecting that at all. And someone proposed it and they said, well, what about it? And it's like, you have to make an instant decision. But it's like, this is a body that makes decisions, that influences. So let me do that. Let me be part of that. Because what this is about is being a Christian presence. For me, it's using my gifts to serve the bowls community. It's being the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And this is what we can do. And it's what we need to think of doing, of using our gifts, not just in the church community, but out there, as it were, in the world. We each have different communities, different groups that we are part of or could be part of, and we have gifts to use there. And it's not just about, trying to bring people into the kingdom. It is being that Christian presence. It's being there. You never know what comes of it, or the conversations that come, because you're out there. In the last Bowls Club at Weybridge, where we were only a year, and one of them talks to me about being a retired vicar. It was like, retired vicar. It's because they knew something. I had a phone call during the pandemic. I phoned up one guy and just felt a prompting to phone him and see how he was. And it was a 45-minute phone call where he was just pouring out his heart, because he was asking, well, you're a priest, aren't you? He's not a retired vicar, a priest. but he knew something and was able to do what he did. And so when you're out there, these opportunities arise. I can remember at the first Bowls Club we were part of, a lady coming and talking to Heather because she'd just got breast cancer and she just needed someone to talk to, and we were there. Another one, her husband's mother died and they were not Christians, any sort of their group, and they thought, oh, we're going to do a funeral. Oh, David and Heather, they need a church. And came and said, would you take my mother's funeral? Which I did, which was amazing because I had all these non-Christians out there at this funeral. And think very carefully how to do it, but that was opportunity. And this is, it comes from being out there and be part of the world, which we need to be. We shouldn't restrict our gifts to the church environment, but consider how can we use them in the world? How can we use our gifts to serve others? So the world has changed during this pandemic, and what we do may have changed. You may have stopped doing some things, you may have started some new things. But are we using our gifts? And where are we using our gifts? Are we using them in the church because they are needed within that? And are we using them in the world because we can make a difference? Each of us has a unique contribution that we can make. And the church and the world will be poorer if we do not use those gifts. Be given gifts to serve others. That's what Peter said. So consider that question from the beginning. How can I serve you today? And think about who the you is that you can serve today and in the coming days. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with all the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. Amen.